Welcome to 303. This video is a compilation of 3 true disturbing Reddit stories. The first of is about camping experience of 4 friends, and how things went south, which resulted in a lifelong trauma for them. So, buckle up for our first story. Who was really calling for help? It was supposed to be a weekend escape. Emily, Josh, Mia, and Chris had planned the camping trip for weeks, lured by the promise of crisp mountain air and serene trails in the heart of the Appalachian wilderness. The group parked their SUV at a secluded trailhead and hiked 6 miles to a remote clearing surrounded by towering pines. "This spot is perfect," Chris announced, dropping his backpack. They pitched their tents as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that flickered like specters between the trees. After dinner, they sat around the campfire, laughter echoing through the forest. Josh, the self-proclaimed thrill-seeker, pulled out an old, tattered book he'd picked up at a second-hand store. "Who's ready for some creepy folklore?" he grinned. The story he read was about an entity called the Wanderer, a figure that mimicked the voices of lost hikers to lure others into the woods. "People swear they hear their friends calling out, only to find no one there," Josh said, lowering his voice. "And if you follow the voice, you disappear." Yeah, very spooky," Mia teased, but there was unease in her tone. That night Emily woke to the sound of someone crying. At first she thought it was Mia. The voice was faint, coming from just beyond the campsite. "Help me," it whimpered, barely audible. Her heart pounded as she unzipped her tent and stepped into the cool night air. The fire had burned down to embers, and the woods were unnervingly still. "Hello?" Emily called softly, goosebumps prickling her arms. The crying grew louder, leading her toward the tree line. She froze when she realized the voice sounded exactly like hers. "Emily, help me!" it cried again, pleading and desperate. Terrified, she stumbled backward and collided with Josh, who had emerged from his tent. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Josh nodded, his face pale. "It's you." They hurried back to the tents, waking Mia and Chris. Josh recounted what had happened, but Chris dismissed it. "You guys are just spooked because of that dumb story." The next morning Chris was gone. They searched for hours, calling his name, their voices swallowed by the dense forest. By afternoon, panic set in. The group decided to hike back to the car and get help, but as they packed up, Emily spotted something odd. A red flannel shirt draped over a low branch. Chris had been wearing red flannel. "Chris!" she shouted, running toward it. When she reached the shirt, she froze. It was neatly folded, with no sign of struggle. Below it was a muddy footprint, a bare human footprint, leading deeper into the forest. They followed the trail until it abruptly stopped. No more footprints, no Chris, just the oppressive silence of the woods. "We need to go," Mia said, her voice trembling. They hurried back toward the trailhead, but as the sun dipped lower, Emily heard it again, the crying voice. This time it was Chris. "Emily! Mia! Josh!" It echoed through the trees, frantic and insistent. Josh grabbed her arm. "Don't listen to it, just keep moving!" But then Mia screamed, pointing ahead. Chris stood in the path, his back to them. Relief washed over Emily until she noticed his rigid posture. "Chris!" she called out. He turned slowly and they all gasped. His eyes were hollow, his face expressionless. He opened his mouth but no words came out. Instead the crying sound emerged, distorted and inhuman. "Run!" Josh shouted. They bolted, branches whipping at their faces, the crying voices growing louder and multiplying. By the time they reached the car, the forest was eerily silent again. Back in the safety of civilization, they reported Chris missing, but no trace of him was ever found. Weeks later, Emily received a voicemail from an unknown number. It was Chris's voice whispering, "Help me, I'm still here." And in the background she heard her own voice crying out, echoing through the line. That was the first story.
This is our second story, about a 12-year-old kid's experience witness a convicted criminal. So let's dive in. My worst childhood memory. It happened when I was 12 years old. I was on vacation in a French town called Guingamp. This trip traumatized me. I'll explain to you. One day my father and my grandparents decided to take me with them in a small quiet park. There my father told me that there was a man in a wheelchair who had killed 2 teenage girls. I laughed and I thought it was a joke. My grandmother said to my father, "Come on, we're going to the other park, 500 feet away." At that time it was between 6 and 8 p.m. in winter. It's dark, so I'm not very reassured after what my father told me. We walk on the path, and we see a man on a wheelchair with 2 dogs on a leash. My father says to my grandparents, "Come on, let's go to the left. There is another path." My grandparents don't really understand and follow my father, and I too. There, the man on the wheelchair goes back and takes the path on the left, the same as the one we took. There my father carries me on his back and runs. My grandparents too. The man in a wheelchair gets up and lets go of these dogs. We get chased by the dogs and jump the neighbor's fence to call for help. Fortunately, this man speaks English and calls the police. 5 minutes later, the police arrive. After that incident, my grandmother was traumatized, so traumatized that she had to go through several counseling sessions. Several weeks later, just before we left for the airport, my mother was watching TV and saw the same man who was arrested by the police for rape and murder. So, that was our second story, my worst childhood memory.
This is the third and last story of this video. This story is about a family moving into a haunted house situated in a hill. The old house on the hill. The house stood on a hill overlooking the town. It was big and old. The paint was peeling, and the windows were boarded up. This was Grandpa and Grandma's house. They lived there for many years, but now it was empty. My mum and Dad said we had to move in. We didn't want to leave our home, but Mum lost her job, and Dad didn't make enough money. We had nowhere else to go, so we packed our things. We said goodbye to our friends, and we drove to the old house on the hill. "It'll be an adventure," Dad said. He tried to sound excited, but I saw the worry in his eyes. The house was scary. It creaked and groaned, like it was alive. "We can fix it up," Mum said. She was trying to be brave, but I knew she was scared too. Inside, cobwebs hung from the ceilings. Dust covered everything. It smelled musty and old, like something had died in here. I shivered. I had a bad feeling about this place. The first night we slept on mattresses on the floor. I kept hearing noises, scratches in the walls, thumps in the night. My little sister Emily cried. "I'm scared," she whispered. "It's just the house settling," Dad said. But I could tell he didn't believe it. Neither did I. The next day we started cleaning. We found holes in the walls, the roof leaked, and there were mice everywhere. This house wasn't just old, it was falling apart. The basement door was hidden under a rug. It was dark and damp down there. The air was thick and heavy. It felt hard to breathe. Emily refused to go down. She said it gave her the creeps. She was right. Something felt wrong down here, something evil. One day, we found an old rocking chair in the basement. It was rocking back and forth, but there was no one in it. We all saw it. It was terrifying. Things got stranger. We heard whispers in the dark, footsteps following us. One night I saw a shadow figure standing at the end of the hall. I screamed, but when I turned on the light, it was gone. Emily started talking to someone. She said it was a little boy named Billy. She said Billy told her he lived in the house a long time ago. We tried to tell Mum and Dad, but they didn't believe us. They said we were letting our imaginations run wild. But I knew the truth. This house was haunted. One day we found a secret room hidden behind a bookshelf in the library. Inside we found old toys and children's clothes. There was a diary too. It belonged to a boy named Billy. Billy's diary told a horrifying story. He wrote about how the house was cursed. He wrote about the ghosts that haunted the halls. And then the entries stopped abruptly. We were terrified. Billy's story confirmed our worst fears. We had to get out of this house. We had to get help. We showed the diary to Mum and Dad. Finally, they believed us. They were scared too. We decided to leave, but when we tried to open the front door, it wouldn't budge. It was like something was holding it shut. We were trapped. We huddled together in the living room, fear gripping our hearts. We knew we couldn't stay here, but we couldn't escape either. We had to do something. We had to fight back. That's when we decided to call an exorcist. The exorcist arrived the next day. He was an old man with kind eyes and a calming presence. He could feel the darkness in the house. He said it was strong and angry. He performed a powerful ritual. He chanted words in a language we didn't understand. The house shook, lights flickered, the ghosts were fighting back. After what felt like an eternity, the exorcist finished the ritual. He was exhausted, but he had a small smile on his face. "It is done," he said. "The spirits are at peace." The house felt different now. The air was lighter. The darkness was gone. We were safe. We could stay. We decided to share the house with Billy and the other spirits. We treated them with respect, and they left us alone. The old house on the hill wasn't so scary anymore. It was our home, a home we shared with the ghosts of the past, and we learned to live together in peace. And that's it. If you are here, that means you enjoyed what you listened. If that's the case, then please leave a like and let us know which story you liked the most. And if you have any suggestion, then please drop a comment on it. And subscribe, because that is very important. See you guys in the next video. Until then, goodbye.